A nuclear submarine can produce unlimited power, distill unlimited fresh water, and generate unlimited oxygen, but it can't make a single meal. That means the pantry, not the reactor, decides when the patrol ends. So how do you feed more than 100 people 3 or 4 times a day for 60 to 90 days with no resupply, no sunlight, and almost no room to store anything? The system is simple, brutal, and runs 24 hours a day. The reactor gives you electricity forever. Distillation plants pull fresh water from the ocean. Oxygen generators split water molecules and scrub out carbon dioxide. All of that can run as long as the reactor has fuel, and that's measured in years, not weeks. But food has to be loaded before you leave, and when it runs out, you go home. No exceptions. The answer is a system built on 3 things: storage, service, and waste. You pack months of provisions into every corner of the boat. You run a galley that never closes, and you manage trash so carefully that the crew doesn't live in their own garbage. Get any of those wrong, and morale collapses long before the food does. Before a submarine leaves port, the provisioning team has already done the math. They know the crew size, the planned patrol length, and the calorie load for each day. Then they order enough food to cover 60 to 90 days at sea with a safety margin on top. For a boat carrying 130 people, that's tens of thousands of meals packed into a space smaller than most restaurants. The galley has walk-in refrigerators and freezers, but they're not big enough to hold everything, so the overflow goes everywhere else. Canned goods get stacked in passageways. Bags of flour and rice fill storage voids. Frozen proteins get jammed into any freezer with room. For the first 2 or 3 weeks of a patrol, you're stepping over cases of food just to move through the boat. It's planned chaos. As the crew eats, space opens up. The clutter clears, but early on, it's tight. Fresh food gets priority at the start. Lettuce, tomatoes, apples, oranges, anything that won't last gets loaded last and eaten first. Submariners talk about the first few weeks as the salad days. You get real produce, you get variety, then it's gone. By week 3, the menu has shifted to frozen vegetables, canned fruit, and shelf-stable staples. The transition is sharp, but it's expected. That's where the baking comes in. Submarine galleys bake bread every single day. Fresh rolls, dinner bread, sandwich loaves, whatever the menu calls for. It's not just about nutrition, it's about smell and routine. When you can't see the sun or feel the wind, a warm loaf of bread reminds you that someone is taking care of you. Desserts work the same way. Cookies, cakes, pies, they're morale tools as much as food. Weight matters too. Every item loaded affects the boat's trim and balance. The supply team tracks not just what goes aboard, but where it's stowed. Heavy items, low and centered. Lighter stores, higher or farther aft. It's a floating Tetris game where a mistake can throw off the submarine's handling underwater. And everything is planned around a menu cycle. The Navy uses a standard core menu that rotates to avoid repetition. Culinary specialists tweak it based on what's available and what the crew likes. Steak and lobster show up on special occasions, holidays, halfway points, the end of a long watch rotation. Those meals aren't just tradition. They're calculated morale events in an environment where every day looks the same. By the time the boat slips beneath the surface, the galley team knows exactly what they have, where it is, and how long it will last. The loadout isn't guesswork, it's logistics under pressure, packed into a steel tube with no room for error. A submarine runs 24 hours a day, and so does its galley. There's no closing time, no down hours. The culinary specialists work in rotating shifts to cover breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the meal most people have never heard of: mid-rats. Mid-rats is short for midnight rations. It's a full meal served late at night for the crew standing the mid-watch, the overnight shift that keeps the boat running while everyone else sleeps. Mid-rats isn't leftovers. It's hot food: eggs, burgers, pasta, breakfast plates, whatever the menu calls for. For the watchstanders pulling long hours in the engine room or sonar shack, mid-rats is the anchor of their day. Miss it, and morale takes a hit. The challenge is space. Submarine galleys are tiny. A typical boat might have a cooking area the size of a small food truck, but it's feeding more than 100 people across 4 or 5 meal periods every day. The layout has to be efficient. Griddles, combi ovens, steam kettles, fryers. Everything is compact and built for volume. There's no wasted motion. Cooks work in tight choreography, and the line has to flow or it backs up fast. Meal schedules are built around watch sections. If everyone tried to eat at once, the mess deck would be chaos and the galley would be overwhelmed, so the crew eats in waves. Each watch section has a time window. You eat, you clean your tray, you move on. It keeps the line moving and the galley productive. The menu itself is designed to fight fatigue. The same meal every week kills morale, so the core menu rotates through a long cycle. Submariners eat well, better than most of the surface fleet by reputation, because the Navy learned decades ago that food is one of the few comforts you can control underwater. You can't go outside, you can't see your family, but you can sit down to a hot plate of food 3 or 4 times a day, and that matters. Special meals break the monotony. Steak and lobster on deployment milestones, pancakes and bacon for a morale breakfast, a chef's special when the culinary team wants to show off. Those moments aren't about the food itself. They're signals that even in a sealed environment, someone is paying attention to how you feel. The galley also handles requests within limits. If a watchstander missed a meal because of an emergency drill or a maintenance window, the cooks will put something together. If someone has a birthday, there's usually cake. It's not a restaurant, but it's not a factory either. The culinary specialists know that their job is half cooking and half morale morale support. And it all happens in a space where a wrong move can mean a burn, a flood, or a fire. Submarine galleys have strict safety protocols. Gear is secured. Cleaning is constant. Grease traps and ventilation systems are monitored obsessively, because a fire in a submerged boat is one of the worst emergencies you can face. The cooks aren't just making food, they're managing risk in an environment that punishes mistakes. By the time the patrol ends, the galley team has served tens of thousands of meals without a break. The crew never sees the ocean, but they never miss a meal either. That's the deal. And in a world where you can't control much, it's the one thing that stays consistent. Food goes in, trash comes out. On land, that's simple. Underwater, in a sealed steel tube with no access to the outside world, it's an engineering problem that can wreck a patrol if you get it wrong. A submarine generates garbage every single day. Food packaging, cans, plastic wrap, spoiled produce, uneaten meals, it all has to go somewhere. And it can't just sit in a corner. Organic waste starts to smell within hours. In an enclosed environment with recycled air, that smell doesn't dissipate, it spreads. It gets into ventilation systems, berthing areas, and crew uniforms. Let it build up and morale collapses. Let it attract pests, and you've got a health crisis. So submarines use a multi-step waste system that starts in the galley. Trash is sorted immediately. Food waste goes into one bin, dry waste into another. Anything that can be compacted gets sent to a trash compactor that crushes it into dense, manageable blocks. The compactor reduces volume by a huge margin, which matters when storage space is measured in cubic inches. Wet waste and anything that smells gets frozen. Submarine freezers aren't just for food, they're also temporary morgues for garbage. Freezing kills the odor and stops decomposition. It buys time until the trash can be disposed of properly. That's where the TDU comes in. TDU stands for Trash Disposal Unit. It's essentially an airlock for garbage. Compacted trash is loaded into weighted cans, usually perforated steel or heavy-duty bags with weights attached so they sink instead of float. The cans are loaded into the TDU. The inner hatch is sealed, the tube is flooded, and the outer hatch opens to eject the trash into the ocean. Then the cycle reverses. Outer hatch closed, tube drained, inner hatch opened, ready for the next load. It sounds simple, but it's a procedural gauntlet. The TDU operates under strict rules. You can't use it in certain areas, restricted zones, shallow water, near shipping lanes. You can't eject trash during certain mission profiles. And the procedure itself requires coordination, because flooding and draining a tube while submerged involves managing pressure, ballast, and buoyancy. A mistake can flood the wrong compartment or create a buoyancy swing that affects the boat's depth control. If the TDU breaks or can't be used, the backup plan is to store everything until you can surface or return to port. That means frozen waste piling up in every available freezer. It means compacted trash stacked in designated storage areas. And it means the crew lives with the knowledge that they're slowly filling their own boat with garbage. It's manageable, but it's uncomfortable. And it's a reminder that even small systems matter when you're underwater for months. Cleanliness is enforced like a combat drill. The galley is cleaned after every meal service. Deck drains are flushed and inspected. Trash staging areas are wiped down. Field days, deep cleaning sessions where the entire crew scrubs their spaces, happen on a regular schedule. It's not about appearances. It's about preventing contamination, controlling smells, and keeping the environment livable. Pest control is part of the equation too. Submarines go to great lengths to avoid bringing insects or rodents aboard, but it happens. A single cockroach can become an infestation in the warm, dark spaces of a submarine. So before a patrol, the boat is inspected. During the patrol, any sign of pests triggers an immediate response. Traps, monitoring, and if necessary, fumigation between patrols. The galley team and the crew both understand the stakes. Waste management isn't glamorous, but it's as operationally critical as sonar or navigation. Because if the air smells like rotting food and the passageways are full of trash, the crew's effectiveness degrades. Fatigue sets in faster, tempers flare, focus slips. In an environment where you can't open a window or step outside, cleanliness is a weapon against decline. By the end of a long patrol, the trash system has processed tons of waste without the crew ever noticing it's working. That's the goal. Invisible reliability, because the moment waste becomes a problem, everything else gets harder. The reactor can run for years without refueling. The oxygen generators can produce breathable air indefinitely by splitting water molecules through electrolysis. The carbon dioxide scrubbers pull CO2 out of the atmosphere using chemical reactions that can be sustained as long as you have power and consumables. The distillation plants turn seawater into fresh water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning at a rate far beyond what the crew needs. On paper, a nuclear submarine can stay submerged forever, but it can't, because while the boat can make air and water, it can't make food. And food is what decides when a patrol ends. Not the reactor, not the crew's willingness to stay at sea. The pantry. Submarine supply officers track food like fuel. They maintain burn-down charts that show exactly how many days of provisions remain based on current consumption rates. They monitor inventory levels for key staples, proteins, starches, canned vegetables, baking supplies. They calculate when the menu will have to shift from planned meals to whatever's left meals. And they give the command team a hard number, the date when the food runs out. That number has a buffer built in, but it's real. When you hit it, you're done. You can stretch meals, you can reduce portion sizes, you can get creative with substitutions, but eventually the math catches up. The freezers are empty. empty. The dry storage is down to random cans. The bread stops because there's no more flour. And at that point, the boat turns toward home. It's not just about calories, it's about morale. A crew can tolerate a lot. Tight spaces, no sunlight, long hours, separation from family. As long as the basics are covered. Hot meals, clean berthing, predictable routines. Food is one of the few variables the Navy can control completely, and they've learned over decades that it's worth the investment. Submariners often say they eat better than any other part of the military, and that's by design, because when you're asking people to live in a sealed tube under the ocean for months, feeding them well isn't a luxury, it's a retention strategy. The transition from fresh to preserved food is the first psychological marker. When the salads disappear, everyone knows they're deeper into the patrol. When the baking slows down or the variety narrows, it's a signal that the end is coming. The crew doesn't panic, but they notice, and the culinary team works to soften the transition with creativity, special meals, surprise desserts, anything to maintain the sense that someone is still putting in effort. Human factors researchers have studied submarine crews for years, and the data is clear. Nutrition and food quality directly affect performance, mood, and cognitive function. A crew that's eating poorly will make more mistakes, experience more interpersonal conflict, and report higher fatigue. A crew that's eating well stays sharp longer. So the galley isn't just a support function, it's a performance multiplier. And in the end, that's the real answer to the question: how do nuclear submarines feed their crew for months underwater? They plan like it's a siege. They cook like it's a mission. They manage waste like it's a threat. And they bake bread every day because morale is measured in warm rolls and midnight eggs as much as it is in mission success. The reactor gives you time. The pantry decides how you use it. And when the last meal is served, the patrol is over, no matter how much power, water, or air you have left. If you want more deep dives into the engineering and logistics that keep the military running, hit subscribe and drop a comment. After 3 weeks underwater, what's the one food you'd miss the most?